It is Thursday, the 27th of July, 2017, and you're listening to Skeptics with a K, the podcast for science, reason, and critical thinking. Skeptics with a K is a production of the Merseyside Skeptics Society, a non-profit organisation for the promotion of scientific skepticism on Merseyside, around the UK, and internationally. I am your host, Mike Hall. With me today is Marsh.
Hello.
And Alice.
Hello.
So after a long run of the Skeptics with a K shitty world tour, where we recorded in various different locations.
We did, yeah, the worst world tour of all time.
Around the world. We're back in our normal pattern with a normal lineup, like doing an ordinary show.
Bog standard show in our normal recording venue, which is your office and not your back bedroom. So we've always, whenever we've said your office, we haven't always made explicit that we mean a totally different building to the one with dinosaur wallpaper.
Yes, we've been here like coming up a year. I think we've been recording here, and we've never mentioned it. Never mentioned it on air that we don't record in the dinosaur room anymore.
Because we just like to fuck with our listeners by keeping them, letting them in, and then shutting them out. Shut it right down. We won't tell you where we are. We'll only occasionally post it to Patreon. We are doing everything we can to make this as unwelcome as possible.
I posted some Patreon-only bonus content, which is a violation of everything I consider moral, ethical, and right.
That is true. And depending how long this show goes, we might have more. If you want to know what Mike thinks about the new Doctor Who, there's a 60% chance you might find out there.
Might be Patreon-only. We'll see. I saw Spider-Man. And
I did as well.
I gather you guys have also seen Spider-Man.
I did. I sat all the way through the film with a massive grin on my face the entire over the way. It's almost perfect.
I really like Spider-Man. I thought it was a little too long. I thought they could have lost a bit of runtime off it.
Little too long.
That is my only criticism.
Yeah.
I think of it is that maybe it ran a bit long.
I was recently away, and I'll talk about that more in a second, but while we were away, just in a cottage in Yorkshire, the older Spider-Mans, not the old Spider-Mans, but the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man films were on. Yeah. So I watched one of those, I think it was the first one, not that long before I saw this one, and fuck me, the difference is incredible. How flat and two-dimensional the entire story of the Andrew Garfield one. Yeah. And I liked it at the time because it was Spider-Man, but I was like, could have been better, but all right, what can we do to film that you can't get it?
Was it the first or the second Andrew Garfield one that you watched?
It was the first one.
The first one winds me up because they decided to change Spider-Man's costume. They made it into something that he could have made himself.
Yes,
was the idea. So the lenses on his eyes were like off sunglasses and things like that. And the second one, they kind of went back to a more classic Spidey costume. But in the first one, they thought this was around the time of Man of Steel when they got rid of Superman's pants because it looked peculiar. And they did a similar thing with the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man. They get rid of the red belt that goes around his waist, which means his costume amounts to a big red arrow pointing at his cock. Big, massive red cock arrow pointing down to that Garfield bulge.
But that's not even the worst thing about that film. Because that film, it's so two-dimensional in the sense that, like, there's the bit where he goes to see Gwen Stacy's family for a meal, and he decides to go up the side of the building rather than go in through the front door. Which is like, you wouldn't have done that. He's like, oh yeah, I took the fire escape. And then her dad, who is the chief of police, and he starts having the conversation with chief of police about how Spider-Man's may be really a hero. It's, oh God, you're just shit at this. Yeah. You are a shit Peter Parker, because you're all kind of like, you think you're all great, and you're not in any way keeping a secret or anything. This is just terrible. Whereas night and day between that and the Ewan,
Tom Holland,
the amazing Ewan. Yeah. I wasn't sure I was going to be on board with him having a big, technically fancy suit, but fine with it in the end.
I was fine with the technically fancy suit, especially because there's nothing that his suit does that it doesn't do in the comics. Yeah, they've just given a reasonable justification within the context of that universe as to why his suit does all the stuff that that it can do. The only thing that I think is new is the voice-controlled AI.
The AI, yeah.
But that's... Spider-Man spends the comics, he spends all the time sitting there chatting to himself. Or, depending on the fashion of the day, thought bubbles all the time with Spider-Man, thought bubbles constantly. How do you do that in a film? Well, they give him a talking AI, so he's got someone he fucking talk to have those Spider-Man-y conversations without having to have
sometimes
the actor standing there randomly chatting to himself.
Sometimes in the cartoon, the comic, he talks to a gargoyle. I think he's called Bruce. Just a stone gargoyle on top of one of the tall buildings.
Yeah.
He sits next to him, and I think he's called Bruce. I could be wrong, but he talks his problems out with him. Always says he's a good listener. But no, loved it. And there was a great reveal, which I won't give away for anyone who hasn't seen it, but it was a very, 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 very good
I did not see
reveal.
that coming.
No,
did not see that coming.
That's nice. You just don't get that kind of
Yeah.
thing. And you can't really say too much about it without spoilers, but there was some decisions made with casting as well that I think played into it exceptionally well.
Yep, absolutely.
Fell
for that hook, line, and sinker. Absolutely fantastic. I also I was very keen on Michael Keaton.
Yes, he was good in it.
I thought he was very good. I liked the way they put him in the kind of furry-necked bomber jacket to be like the vulture's collar that he's got on.
Yeah.
Because it will be very easy. Like you look at the vulture in the comics, he looks fucking ridiculous.
He does look ridiculous.
Absolutely fucking
ridiculous. And he's
ridiculous.
not doing the vulture things in the film. He's not like stealing people's youth to keep himself.
No.
Which he does in the comics and stuff.
But the way they gave that kind of ruffled neck look was by just putting him in a bomber jacket, which just suited his character and gave the appropriate look to the the character, and I thought it worked really well.
The only thing I wasn't sure about, you had no spidey sense, as best I could tell.
Oh, the producers have talked about that.
Oh, really?
And they've said he does have spidey sense. They've just played it down in this film because it was played up so heavily in the previous two adaptations.
It was, but there's a couple of times when he gets jumped that it's like,
and he's still kind of figuring out his powers. He doesn't know how to. So they've said it's not that we've written Spidey Sense out.
Good.
It's just that we downplayed it this time round because it had been pushed so heavily in the other films, and it's nice to see a teenager playing a teenager.
Yes, although he's still playing older, isn't he? Because he played 14, 15, isn't he?
Yeah,
like 17 or something.
I think he's about 15. The character I think is playing about 15, and the actor is 19. But
19.
It's still like Tobey Maguire was fucking 29, playing Peter Parker in high school. And one of the things that I think that because the Tobey Maguire films I'm very keen on. I like the Tobey Maguire films a lot. Especially the first two.
Not the third one.
The third one was ropey. But
the third one was a fucking abomination. The third one was almost the reason, basically, that they had to sack it all off and start again.
But the first two I really liked. But Tobey Maguire doesn't say a fucking word when he's got the mask on. Spider-Man in those films has got basically no dialogue. Peter Parker's got plenty of dialogue. Spider-Man's got no dialogue. Whereas in the comics, you can't shut Spider-Man up.
Yeah.
That's one of the things about the character is that he's constantly sitting there chatting shit, which they played up when Spider-Man appeared in Civil War.
Yes,
when
brilliant,
I think,
amazing. Oh God, I love that.
I don't remember who it was. Was it Falcon said to him, you don't usually talk this much when you're fighting, and he's like, oh, sorry.
Yeah.
And that's something that they've got right with this version. Whereas I thought the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man.
He talked, but he was an arsehole. Yeah. he was a dick to people. He's like, oh, fuck off, you prick.
And he, as Peter Parker, Andrew Garfield, I thought was a bit like too cool. He's there, skateboarding around, and, chatting to people, and he's got mates and things. And I feel like, oddly enough, Marvel understand their character and what makes it work. Who'd have fucking imagined that? But yeah, Spider-Man. That's what Marsh and I think.
The best Marvel film.
Gushing about Spider-Man. What do you think, Alice?
That's good.
What do you think?
Is that all you've got on it?
Is that the word you can get in edgeways to our ridiculous fanboying?
I enjoyed it a lot. I really liked it. It made me laugh a lot, which was good.
They got the humour in it right, because the others were basically absent humour the majority of the film. The previous ones, the Tobey Maguire ones, Andrew Garfield.
Tobey Maguire was very angsty. Spent the whole time about...
You have a little bit of humour up front, and then it's like, right, we're in the middle of it now, we've got to just be serious, unless you're emo dancing down the fucking street. Oh, God, that was such a bad film, the third one.
I didn't mind the emo dancing film, actually, in Spider-Man 3, because he's meant to be a dickhead. He's not meant to actually be cool. This is
still bad.
This is Peter Parker thinking he's being cool and he's actually being a big loser still.
It was awful.
I graduated.
Well, that's good. We're probably not going to spend 20 minutes talking about that, although we have talked about Spider-Man. We have got our priorities totally out of whack here. Congratulations on graduating, Alice.
See, you had the fancy hat and...
Well, I didn't get a squashed hat. So in most universities, PhDs get the floppy hats.
Right.
But I still had a regular
You had the
mortarboard, which
mortarboard.
was a bit disappointing. But I had a nice red gown, which was quite good.
Good. Good.
It's a properly big gown as well. Some universities I've seen, because there's been loads of graduation ceremonies over the last few weeks in the UK for different places. And I know a lot of people who've gone on to do PhDs at other universities or doctoral things at other universities as well. And a lot of them, they have like these really shitty small gowns that stop like at the knee. And I have, like a properly drowned...
You don't want a mini gown.
No, it doesn't seem quite grand enough. So
that's probably what they give you at like these glorified polytechnics. They renamed universities back in the day.
So I had like a proper big, huge gown that kept sliding off the back of my shoulders because it's really heavy on top and there's nothing to like hold it down. So it kind of kept sliding off.
Because it was the day after the Merseyside Skeptics summer barbecue picnic thing, which was good. And so you'd come out of that with having caught the sun.
I got a bit sunburnt at the picnic, and luckily I think I got away with it, because then for graduation I wore a dress that was quite high, so it covered my chest and hid the fact that I was quite badly burnt on my chest, because that would have clashed beautifully with the bright red gown that I was wearing. So I think I just about got away with it.
Well, it might have been like a contrast thing, that you would have looked like the sunburn would have looked less red because you were wearing such red.
Maybe, but then there's also the fact that my hair very obviously clashes, because I've got bright orange hair, clashes with the robes, and then sunburn would have clashed with the robes. I had to put a lot of makeup on my forehead because my forehead was a little bit burnt.
Right.
But I think I just about got away with it. I graduated in the engineers ceremony.
Okay.
So with all the engineering lot, that's the dullest ceremony to sit through. Because usually you go to a graduation ceremony and there's at least like people dressed interestingly that you can look at as graduation ceremonies.
Interestingly?
Usually, like in Liverpool especially, people dress up for graduation. And
I thought everyone's just wearing like a cap and gown.
Yeah, but underneath the gown, you can usually see a bit of the clothes under the gown. You can see the shoes and stuff. It's interesting. It's the only interesting thing about graduation ceremonies. Graduation ceremonies are so dull. We didn't even have an honorary graduate in our ceremony, which was kind of a good thing because it's less speeches. But it's a speech from the Chancellor, a procession of people coming in. There's some organ music, and then it's just lots of names being read out as everybody claps.
Yeah, 4 hours of handshakes.
Horrible. So engineering graduations even worse, because fucking all blokes. There's no women. Virtually zero women. There were very few female graduates. A lot more in the
like
PhDs.
A Doctor Who cast party.
A lot more in the PhD graduates who were graduating with them. So there were people from different institutes graduating with their engineers for PhDs. And
but
stuff.
If you let women onto an engineering course, that's a place that a man could be happy. You might not be getting the best candidates if you tokenistically have a man on there as well. It's a box ticking exercise by the point where you start allowing women, etc., etc.
It's really strikingly obvious, disproportionately men in engineering, which is a real shame. But so that was my experience of the ceremony. I was sat up on the stage as well, which meant that when my shoulder started to die, like partway through, because I'd been sat on a wooden bench, having to sit upright and clapping constantly, my shoulder just started to collapse partway through.
You could have not been clapping as much. I don't think anyone would have taken it personally.
I clapped less and more gently and stuff, and kind of got away with it, but it was just.
If you just do the symbolic clapping where you're not actually making any, like, your hands are going close, but you're making almost no noise at all. But if there's enough people clapping around, you look like you're really, that's what you want to do. Like, yeah, well done.
But then by the point my shoulder had fell off, there wasn't a lot I could do about it. I just had to kind of hope that it didn't hurt too much for the rest of the ceremony. But I couldn't fidget because I was sat right on the stage, so people could see me.
You know, people with visual impairments can get like a seeing eye dog. If you have a disability that stops you clapping too much, can you get like a clapping hands animal, like a seal?
A clapping seal.
Yeah. Do you think they can do those? It's like, I'm sorry, we've got your accessibility seal. It comes on. Well done.
Well, congratulations, Alice.
It was nice. It was a beautiful sunny day in Liverpool as well. And then we went out for a really nice dinner and a few drinks and stuff. It was nice.
So like you finished your thesis and that was good, and you passed your Viva and that was good, and now you've graduated. So that's it. That's
done.
That's officially a doctor now.
Done.
You can use the title.
No one can take it away from me.
No.
They can't say, oh shit, we fucked up. It's all done now.
Do you need to start being credited on this show as Dr. Alice Howarth, PhD?
PhD.
Yeah, you want that in the show notes?
You could put all my letters after my name.
Well, we'll have plenty of space because Mike doesn't have any.
The full styling underneath. Yeah,
we got loads of space for yours because Mike doesn't have any. Mike Hall.
Mike Hall.
8 letters. How economical can you be?
It's magnificent.
You could use all my names as well. My name's ridiculously long as it is because I've got 2 middle names.
You do. You
and
do
quite
have
a long surname.
A lengthy name.
Yep.
Maybe that'll go on your QED badge this year. That might be a laugh. Might be a laugh to do that. Marsh, what have you been doing?
Well, I didn't make it to the picnic because I've been away for a week. I've been away on holiday for various different things. So we went to Hawes in Yorkshire. We went to visit Hawes, Haws, the place. So,
just one.
So every year, Nick's mum likes to go to Hawes.
Does she?
As a nice little treat. So this year, I went with her to visit Hawes. And it's a nice place. It's actually, it's a small like village in Yorkshire, and we were able to sort of like get around a bit and see different like things. I went to Ripon, and I've not been to Ripon since I was a bairn. It was kind of like Ripon was one of the places you'd go if you were in the northeast. Ripon was one of the places you'd go for a school trip. You go like Ripon Cathedral and stuff like that.
You've confused all of our American listeners by using the word bairn.
Child.
They have no idea what that means at all.
Infant. Kid, yes. A youthling. When I was but a youngling. So you got to Ripon. I'm sure you've been. Maybe you left the northeast.
No, I never went to Ripon. Never went to Ripon. Tynemouth, yeah.
Well, you were close. You were a bit further north.
Whitley Bay,
south. Yeah.
Sure.
No, we go south. It'd be Ripon, Fountains Abbey, Lightwater Valley.
Beamish.
Those are the places you'd go.
Beamish.
We'd go to Beamish. Obviously,
everyone went to Beamish.
We went to Ripon and went around. There's lots of different museums and stuff like that in Ripon. It's all quite small, but it was quite nice. But they've got 3 museums. They've got the police station, the courthouse, and the workhouse museum.
Okay.
And he went in each of those, and the courthouse was quite small. And it's all kind of like Victorian stuff. So this is what a Victorian police station would have looked like. And here are the cells. You can lock yourself in one of the jail cells and see what it's all like and stuff like that. Here's a Victorian courthouse, and it was just one room, but it was all right. And then there's a Victorian workhouse. Now, obviously, American listeners may not be aware, but a workhouse is if you were too poor to actually live in Victorian era, you would get sent to the workhouse where men and women would be separated immediately on getting in there. You'd be stripped naked, all your clothes would be taken away, you'd be sprayed down and deloused and made to wear these sackcloths basically and fed incredibly small rations of food, and you'd have to work for your living. But effectively, you'd just be working to stay there. There is no way that you're then working yourself out of the workhouse because you don't get enough money. It's not like you can save up for, like, right, I've spent enough time in the workhouse now that I can get out of the workhouse and start my own, get a house or start a job elsewhere. It's like once you're in the workhouse, you're basically it, unless you're a kid who gets taken out for an apprenticeship. And so we went all around this workhouse, and you see all the little cell things they were staying in, and here's where they were like hosed down, and here's this, and we talked, and all the exhibitions saying about how dirty it was and how there was just like chickens wandering around shitting everywhere, and how you'd be one of the jobs you do is just crack stones into gravel all day. So you get a big stone and you crack it in the gravel, and you get another big stone, you crack that in the gravel, and that's what you do all day, like 15 hours a day or whatever. And if you were married, there was like 3 minutes on a Sunday that you'd get to see your partner, and then you'd be back away, and your kids were all taken away from you. And this is kind of what it was all saying, is that this is how they dealt with the poor. But at least it was like a rich benefactor, a philanthropist would see this as a philanthropic gesture to have these places where the poor could be saved from destitution and drunken revelry and stuff like that. Halfway around, they have the results of the survey that they've asked the kids, do you think this is a good idea or a bad idea? Is a workhouse a good thing or a bad thing? 40% of the kids, it's a good thing.
40%?
40% good thing. 15% didn't know. No, sorry, 15% said it was a necessary evil. 20% said they didn't know. Only 25% of kids who were taken around this said it was a bad thing. And it's like, you were taken away from your family. You worked there until you died, grinding rocks, and then they had all little post-it notes where kids had written down what they thought.
Yeah.
And it was like, very, 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 very good idea. And much better than the current system we have. At least it gave the poor people something to do. And I thought, this is why we Brexited. We've raised a fucking generation of little Tories. So, well, if you don't work hard enough to have been born rich, it's your own fault if you get sent to the workhouse and worked until you die. Yeah, so it was just absolutely incredible walking around going, kids saw this and thought, this is a very, very, very good thing.
Good God.
Well done. Fuck me. As I mentioned, I was off work last week, which means I wasn't doing my marketing job that I have. I also wasn't working for Good Thinking for the week. I took a rare week off thinking I'm not going to do any Good Thinking work. I'm going to take it easy. We're going to be just out and about, go to London, see art exhibitions, things like that.
An actual week off.
Actual week of not doing any work.
Yeah.
So on Friday,
which Alice gets all the time now.
Alice gets all the time now that she's an official bum. Alice is 2 steps away from the workhouse, which I think is a very, very, very good thing. So on Friday we were going to go to the Lady Lever Art Gallery in Port Sunlight. I've never been to the art gallery there. There's a nice Japanese exhibition on there. We thought it'd be a nice way of bookending the week, having gone to the London exhibition. Mm-hmm. So I was just about to get in the car to drive to this exhibition. I got a phone call from the Daily Mail asking for a quote on the NHS England homeopathy consultation, which I had no idea what they were talking about at this point because I was on a week off. And it's about midday, so I was like, hang on a second, I'll get you a quote back. And I looked it up, and 5 minutes before I got that phone call, The Independent had published an article. Headline, NHS set to ban homeopathy for patients because it is not evidence-based and any benefits are down to placebo. And I thought, I'm not taking today off after all. I'm probably going to be working. So the rest of the article continued. The health service currently spends more than £90,000 a year on the natural treatment. Doctors should stop prescribing homeopathic medicines to NHS patients, the health service has said. The change has been proposed because, quote, at best homeopathy is a placebo and a misuse of scarce NHS funds, which could be better devoted to treatments that work, said Simon Stevens, NHS England's chief executive. That's a really significant step. That's a really significant statement to have the head of NHS England. Now, for people who aren't fully aware of how it works, NHS England is one of the bodies that oversees what can be prescribed in clinical commissioning groups, which are the small groups that make the decisions to fund things locally. And it was the CCG, the clinical commissioning group, that we had our legal case with in Liverpool, that we've been asking to fill in consultations in the Wirral and Enfield. Those are individual ones, but NHS England sort of sits above that and also sits above GPs, also sits above the hospitals. So it's basically kind of the top level, pretty much. So to have the chief exec of NHS England saying homeopathy is a misuse of NHS funds is pretty astonishing, really. The Independent article carried on. The NHS currently spends £92,412 a year on the natural quote treatment, which uses highly diluted dose of natural substances that some claim help the body heal itself.
I mean, it's not always natural substances.
Yeah, there's a few problems with that line, to be honest. The fourth line of the article. For one, the NHS spends a fuck of a lot more than £92,000 a year. The £92,000 a year is only prescriptions. Costs. That's if you go to your GP and they write you out a prescription to take to a pharmacy, and when you get that fulfilled, it's the cost of that prescription. If you factor in all of the actual homeopathy services that the CCGs are directly commissioning, when we checked that a few years ago, it was £3 to £5 million a year. Though that has come down pretty significantly recently. The exact figures on that are still pending. I'm asking and I'm looking to collate those at the moment, but we know it's now stopped in the northwest. We know it's stopped in the northeast. We know Wales have stopped. We know Bristol is down significantly. So it's going to be less than £5 million, but exactly where, hard to say. Also, the idea that homeopathy is highly diluted dose of natural substances that help the body heal itself, that isn't really what homeopathy is, because it's not always natural substances. You've seen things like homeopathic Berlin Wall to help with separation anxiety, homeopathic colour blue, just the colour blue. That's not a natural substance. Well, I suppose blue is naturally occurring if it's refracted light.
Well, but blue isn't refracted light.
It's not a substance.
It's also how it's to do with how we perceive it.
Yes, that's true.
The colour doesn't exist outside of our brain.
And it's certainly not a substance. And also, to say it's highly diluted is missing the point. It is diluted to a point where there is no natural substance or any substance left apart from just liquid. So it's always the thing that annoys me whenever you see this homeopathy covered, is that the media still persists on going down the homeopathy practitioner's line of saying that this is highly diluted. But we'll skip that for the time being. The article carries on. Last year, 1.1 billion prescription items overall were signed off by GPs at a cost of £9.2 billion, an amount that health bosses have been tasked to reduce through increased scrutiny of the medicines provided. The new national guidelines name 18 treatments that should be generally not prescribed and sets out action on limiting the prescription of around 3,200 products, such as eye drops, cough mixture, sun cream, things that are commonly available over the counter in chemists and supermarkets. And this list of the products, this is the list that we talked about a little while ago. It came up. It was the top 10 products that were being banned by from prescription on the NHS in this cost-cutting measure. It was a thing that when it was covered on BBC, as I mentioned on the show, the BBC Today programme actually highlighted that homeopathy wasn't on that list. And I picked up at the time that that's an unusual thing to have happened, that the media is actually inserting homeopathy in that conversation. What I didn't say at the time is after the BBC had that conversation with Simon Stevens, head of NHS England, on air, say, why isn't homeopathy on that list? I got a phone call from NHS England asking me how much the NHS spends on homeopathy. And I was able to talk them through how much they were spending on homeopathy.
Sure.
And how...
I mean, that seems ass backward to me.
It does seem strange. But that's...
okay.
But this is part of the issue, is that there is nobody whose job at the NHS is to collate the figures spent on homeopathy, because all those decisions are made locally. And, and all NHS England were looking at, basically, was the list of stuff being prescribed and the costs of that. So they're getting that out there. I think it's NHS Digital is the system that they use that has prescriptions, but they didn't know the broader costs. So they were thinking, it's less than 100 grand. There's this other big long list of stuff that's in the millions and tens of millions and hundreds of millions. Homeopathy is not a priority. And I was able to talk them through the fact that actually, if you were able to put prescriptions on the blacklist, it would put pressure on the other part of the NHS that was still funding homeopathy, and that could save up to £5 million, by getting rid of homeopathy right across the board.
Yep.
And also, it helps send a signal in all the other kind of ways that homeopathy is not a valid treatment, it's not a valid system of medicine, and that protects patients who then go private. They're not going to believe this definitely works on the NHS.
Because a major pillar of homeopathy's claim to legitimacy is that it is available on prescription from NHS GPs.
Absolutely, yeah. That's something that a lot of homeopaths will point out, that this must work, it must be credible, even your GP can prescribe it. So I was able to talk that through and talk through the fact that the other side of it is that you might remember 2 years ago, October 2015, Good Thinking threatened legal action against the Department of Health for the idea of putting homeopathy on the blacklist. We identified that there was this blacklist, that there was criteria through which things are judged as to whether they go on the blacklist or not, and that by every objective criteria we could tell that could be applied to homeopathy, it met the criteria for going on the blacklist.
Yeah.
We said put it on, Department of Health refused, said we're not going to do anything. We said that's a decision that's open to judicial review. We threatened to take them to court. In November 2015, they caved, or they backed down rather, and said, okay, you want us to have a review. We'll review whether we're going to put homeopathy on the blacklist. That review will take place in June 2016. Then something else happened in June 2016 that distracted an awful lot of people and functionally left us without a government for a significant period of time.
Really?
Yeah, I can't remember.
I'm surprised I hadn't noticed that.
You'd have thought you'd have spotted it. You'd have spotted it. But just because Brexit did jump in front of the queue in terms of priority in June 2016, that didn't stop us. We at Good Thinking kept asking. We've been in contact with the Department of Health periodically over the last 18 months to say, you promised us this. If you don't have the review that you promised, we only stopped our legal action because you promised this review. If you don't have that review, not only would we resume our legal action, but it also might look very bad for your side of the legal action if you backed down initially and now didn't follow through with your promises. So you arguably could be in a worse position if you don't go through with the review. And so early July, I last asked them, or early July, we last got an answer from the Department of Health saying they weren't going to have a review because NHS England are going to have a review about homeopathy, and they were going to amalgamate the two and put homeopathy into that review. So on both sides of this, it was kind of the intervention from Good Thinking had a big reason, played a big role in getting homeopathy on this list in the first place. I convinced them at NHS England it was worth doing, and our legal action with the Department of Health also put pressure in there. So we're sort of one of the reasons that homeopathy is on that list, and that's really weird to a point where I can't really state it. I can't feel comfortable stating it as clearly as it probably is. I feel like I'm overstating it. I feel like I have a kind of a slight embarrassment, but we are one of the reasons it was on the list in the first place, which is bizarre to be in. So that's kind of where all that was. So let's go back to this independent article for a moment. They mentioned 3,200 products. It's not just homeopathy that they're looking to get rid of. Other treatments, the independent mentions, that could soon be banned by the NHS include herbal treatments, lidocaine plasters, omega-3 fatty acids, and unlicensed use of the painkiller coproximol. And these were all revealed in March. Those ones revealed in March, along with doctors providing. They're going to stop providing travel vaccinations for specific illnesses. Sure. Not all vaccinations, but really specific niche ones. They're going to stop those. Prescriptions for hay fever tablets and gluten-free food for celiacs. And this was the big list. And as the Independent points out, the plans are at the centre of a formal public consultation aiming to save the health service £250 million a year. That's the goal. So the $5 million that it could save for homeopathy is a small amount of that. The $92,000 it could save on homeopathy prescriptions is a small point of that. But it also makes a lot of sense to put homeopathy on there. So that is what's happening right now. That was what was announced on Friday. And they have this public consultation, and if you read the consultation document, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. So they talk about the background of homeopathy, saying that homeopathy treats patients with, or it seeks to treat patients with a highly diluted substance that are administered orally. That's pretty good. It doesn't say there's anything left in it. That's fine. What their recommendation is, they point out the 2010 House and Commons Science Technology Committee review, which we covered at the time. So we're going back 7 years on that one now. And how they found the use of homeopathy wasn't evidence-based and that any benefits to patients were down to placebo effect alone, although caveat, benefits due to placebo effect.
Well, on that topic, looking at the comments underneath the original article from The Independent, where they'd said we're getting rid of homeopathy because it works just as a placebo, and I scanned through some of the comments on there, and we've got, yes, but placebos are a legitimate medical treatment. Placebo is a very powerful cure. Trick the brain into thinking it has the cure and the power to convince the body that it is cured. Someone else said, could homeopathy be worth the money as a placebo? The placebo effect is real and could be used to enhance medication. That is all medication, not just homeopathy. And somebody else says that everyone is babbling on about the placebo effect, but no one is giving serious thought as to how a serious condition can be healed due to the placebo effect. If the body can heal something serious just once, it is proof that there is a natural process that can be encouraged and developed to achieve the same. So these are and this is one of the reasons
why... That's a snapshot. There were a fuckload more of placebo is magic.
That was just me scrolling through, saying, oh, there's one, take a screenshot, scroll through, there's one, take a screenshot. A lot of people who are saying, yeah, homeopathy's bollocks and it's just a placebo. But placebos are brilliant, so it should be fine.
Yeah, and that's the harm with the placebo stuff.
Yeah, people who should be on the right side of the argument. And they're advocating for keeping homeopathy because they've been convinced that placebos are magic.
Yeah, I completely agree. So in this consultation, they point out the Science Technology Committee, and then they point out their position, which is that they agree with the findings of the committee for the lack of evidence and consider homeopathy suitable for inclusion in the proposed guidance of stuff to be banned. And their recommendations are: advise CCGs that prescribers in primary care should not initiate homeopathic items for any new patients, so no new homeopathy prescriptions. And advise CCGs to support prescribers in de-prescribing homeopathic items in all patients, and where appropriate, ensure the availability of relevant services to facilitate the change. So anybody who's on a prescription for homeopathy, get them off it onto something that might either help them or into a service where they could have a different form of treatment that might be more effective.
And I think that second part is really important as well. This isn't just a dead stop. This isn't just, okay, nothing. It's like, okay, let's find you something else. That's, the NHS England have said we have to find the support services to help people who are currently taking homeopathy to have their condition treated, well, at all from our position, but from the patient's position, it's like, okay, you can't have this anymore, but let's find something else that's going to help you. And I think that's an important thing to have done, is to ensure that the patients who are currently taking homeopathy are taken care of.
Yeah, and we saw exactly the same thing when the world stopped funding homeopathy, when Liverpool stopped funding homeopathy. There was a transition period. It's not like patients who've been told this thing is really good for them overnight are no longer getting it, because that would be incredibly distressing and upsetting. It has to be phased correctly. But bear in mind, what they're getting at the moment is nothing.
Yes.
They're just being told it's something, and it isn't anything.
Yeah.
So those are great recommendations, and very happy with those. One of the other things that was in the document was this really interesting graph, which shows the cost per 1,000 patients on homeopathy per CCG. And obviously this is a graph that you can't see as listeners, but we'll describe it. It lists little blue bars for every single CCG. It doesn't name them because there's 209 CCGs.
Yeah.
And it shows you how much per 1,000 patients that CCG is paying for homeopathy. I'd say 90 to 95% of CCGs, they spend less than a $5 per 1,000 patients on homeopathy. Yeah. But there is one CCG that spends £55 per patient. It skews the entire thing by miles. Now, I don't know which CCG that was, but it's pretty clear that there's only two CCGs over a tenner, really. One is about 28 quid and one is about 55 quid. So what this shows is that this is where GPs are prescribing it. Mm-hmm. What this is likely to be is there'll be a couple of CCGs where there is a GP who is also a homeopath or is likely to be a big proponent of homeopathy. Yeah. And that is skewing all the spending hugely. That's what's likely to show here. But that graph is so startling in its disparity that it shows you really what's going on here. This is not a widespread treatment, and thankfully so.
And that's an official graph, and you can tell because they wrote the word official in big letters
at the top of the page.
On the top of the page.
Well, that's actually because it's from the official consultation document in total.
And we can tell that's an official consultation document because they write the word official
on the top of
in big letters on every page.
Yeah, well, the one I was working from on Friday when I was talking to the press didn't have official. It had confidential at the top, and I thought, I don't know why I've got this. I've not been sent it. I've just found a link online, but it says confidential and draft. So
does this show technically in breach of the Official Secrets Act now, then?
Maybe. But the other thing that was great was, as part of the consultation stuff, there was an appendix, which is the position statement on homeopathy by NHS England. And this, I think, is, again, well worth reading. This is something that was tweeted out by the Director of Communications for NHS England, who was saying this is how NHS England will stop homeopathy funding. That's how he tweeted it, which is like, fuck me, this is strong stuff. So they say, NHS England's view is that, at best, homeopathy is a placebo and a misuse of scarce funds, which could be better devoted to treatments that work. Data on the residual use and cost of homeopathy on the NHS are hard to come by, even for NHS England. A recent Freedom of Information request by a third party suggested that at least £578,000 has been spent on prescribing homeopathy over the past 5 years, with the total cost being higher than that when the cost of consultations is factored in. Now, that third party who found the £578,000 over 5 years, I'm pretty sure that's Alan Hennis of the Nightingale Collaboration, who goes through that data. I would be surprised if it wasn't him. He certainly does put data that shows that together. And when they talk about the total cost being higher when you include consultations, that's my data that they're talking about in there. They say in this, as well as primary care prescribing, there are 2 homeopathic hospitals affiliated to NHS trusts in Bristol and London. That's not true. There's only one homeopathic hospital. Bristol is no longer a homeopathic hospital. And they say in both cases, CCGs have sought to restrict provision. So it's clear that CCGs don't want this. They say Bristol CCG is the lead commissioner for homeopathy for 13 CCGs. Weirdly, again, that isn't true. It's only 4 CCGs in Bristol. There's Bristol, there's North Somerset, there's Somerset, and there's South Gloucestershire. I know this data like the back of my hand at the moment. So it's interesting that even in the official documentation, it's such a muddy and hard to kind of figure out picture that they don't get the details right. This is how hard it is to get to the bottom of this stuff. And they also say that homeopathy referrals in Bristol, in the Bristol area, are now subject to an individual prior approval, which has reduced volume significantly but not completely. Now, the idea of an individual prior approval is that it's the individual funding request I've talked about before, where you have to go in, your GP has to go in front of a panel of other GPs and argue that homeopathy is right for you, and that's how that's the only way that they can get funded. I'm not convinced that's true about Bristol. They still have some direct prescription. But what I have found in my recent Freedom of Information requests is last time I checked, which is the 2015-16 year, they were down by 30% in terms of their spending. I'd be surprised if when the 16-17 figures come in, they're not down even further. And I know that the private provider of homeopathy has actually issued a recent press release saying all of our patients need to get behind us because we're under threat at the moment. So it feels like Bristol is going in the right direction too. And that's the only place in England outside of London that still funds homeopathy. They talk about UCLH, which is the London homeopathy. They said there's a number of complexities that limit their ability to identify the system cost of providing homeopathy. And again, this is interesting that NHS England acknowledge that the hospital that's providing homeopathy in London isn't able to tell them how much homeopathy is providing because it's got issues in there around the way that they provide homeopathy to certain services. And again, this is something we need to get to the bottom of and something we're working on, but we're trying to get a good handle on this. So the last point they make is, in addition to consulting on initiatives in primary care prescribing of homeopathy, it's therefore also proposed that we explore including a ban on reimbursing homeopathic treatments in the NHS standard contract. That's what they said. We explore including a ban on reimbursing homeopathic treatment. So, a few different things to talk about here. This got a huge amount of play.
Yes.
The BBC went with the headline, NHS plans to scrap homeopathy treatments. The Guardian, a misuse of scarce funds, NHS to end prescription of homeopathic remedies. The Times, homeopathy is a waste of money, so stop prescribing it, GPs told. Daily Mail, NHS announces a ban on homeopathy and herbal medicine because they are a misuse of scarce funds.
And herbal medicine as well.
Herbal medicine was in that list, actually. In the 3,200, they talk about herbal medicine, specifically herbal medicines that have got a traditional herbal registration, which is stuff you can sell over the counter. So it's not all herbal medicines, but they're largely going to be the ones that were available on the NHS in the first place. Sure. Again, this is it's a really good step that they've included herbal medicine in there. They reckon that's going to save about £100,000. So that's a really encouraging thing to see in there.
Interesting. Good.
Independent, NHS set to ban homeopathy for patients because it's not evidence-based and benefits are down to placebo. The Telegraph, NHS to ban homeopathy and herbal medicine. The Mirror, NHS to ban homeopathy and curb other prescriptions. Metro's, doctors told not to prescribe homeopathic drugs. And even Pulse went with GPs set to be banned from prescribing homeopathy. There's a lot in these headlines really here. And wider than that, there was a huge amount of congratulations on a victory for skeptics. People talking about, well done, it's about time this happened. It's great to see homeopathy is finally dead. It's banned. All the news saying it's banned, it's done. It's not done. They've missed something absolutely key. This was the announcement of a formal public consultation. They've said, this is what we're planning to do. Now we need to ask people, do you agree with this? So it's not banned yet. People are acting like this means Friday they put out the statement, homeopathy's banned. By Saturday, there is no more homeopathy on the NHS. That isn't going to happen. This consultation is open until October 21st, and it's important that we see this in the right light. It's very good. It's very exciting. It's hugely important. It's a massive step. A hugely massive step. When I started in skepticism, we could never imagine that this position was possible, where the head of NHS England is saying homeopathy is a misuse of public funds, where the communications director of NHS England is saying this is how we will stop homeopathy, where CCG after CCG has come out and saying this is not worth prescribing. I never imagined this was possible. Hell, when I started working with Good Thinking 4 years ago, I could never have imagined that I'd be a big part of making this happen. But if we congratulate ourselves too much now and then don't take the time to make sure this actually happens, it's all for nothing. This is a public consultation. You need to take part. We've had the Liverpool one, we've had the World one, we've had the Enfield one, we've had the Charity Commission. Those are all big. Those are all important. Arguably, this is the biggest step for homeopathy on the NHS yet. The Liverpool one can only restrict it in Liverpool. If this goes through and if the recommendations are accepted, this is a great signal that it's on the way out and everyone should take part in this. So there's things you can do. If you really want to make this happen, there's things you can do. First of all, if you're happy with this kind of work, it'd be good to fund it. We are a charity. I've spent the 3 years of my life working on this, and that's great. I've enjoyed every minute of it. It's an honour to be able to work on this. But we are a charity. And if every SWAC listener threw a quid into the pot for Good Thinking, we'd make more money in a single week than we have in 3 years in terms of donations. If every listener gave 2 quid, it would cover the entire charity's salary costs for an entire year. But above all else, take a few moments to answer the online survey. The link will be in the show notes. Last Friday was a huge step, but it's not finished yet. Let's make sure we finish this.
A few days ago, we got an email from a listener in Australia about a link his friend had shared on Facebook. The link was to a blog post on a blog called The Mind Unleashed, who say, "We seek to break the chains of conventional thinking," and has posts with titles such as, "I have no intuition, what can I do?"
Well, you can't figure it out for yourself, that's for sure. That's the one thing you can't do.
Could sound therapy be the new antidepressant? And retrocognition, can you receive messages from the past?
Sound therapy is, I think, where you go and see a practitioner in Liverpool. Liverpool or Manchester.
We're also receiving messages from the past. That's just like writing.
Yeah.
I never even realised that.
Writing, film, recording.
Yeah. That's literally anything.
That's how communication works.
In fact, all communication is from the past.
Conversation is you receiving a message fractionally from the past.
So the answer to that is yes. Retrocognition, factually true, science-based.
Blimey.
The article in particular our listener Barry shared with us was titled Chemotherapy Proven to Spread Cancer, Cause Lethal Tumours in Groundbreaking New Study. The article begins, Albert Einstein College of Medicine just proved that chemotherapy is a cash machine for big pharma. In a groundbreaking new study...
Is that what the headline was? Is that what the press release that Albert Einstein's medicine put out? It's like, study to prove chemotherapy is a cash machine for big pharma. Yeah.
In a groundbreaking new study, they've proven that chemotherapy causes cancer cells to spread throughout the body to replicate themselves, making your cancer worse, not better. Of course, the obvious first thought is that this is complete and utter bollocks, and some would say I'm occasionally too charitable to proponents of pseudoscience, but the article actually did reference what at first glance looks like a proper academic study. At least it has big words in it like neoadjuvant. So it seems like there might be more to this story than a simple outright dismissal. The title of the paper was Neoadjuvant Chemotherapy Induces Breast Cancer Metastasis Through a TMM-Mediated Mechanism.
Semicolon... causing a cash cow for big pharma.
And it is a peer-reviewed academic study from researchers out of Albert Einstein College of Medicine in New York.
So they're saying that chemotherapy can induce metastasis in a cancer that otherwise has not metastasized. Okay.
That's what the title
That's
of
what the
paper
title seems to be claiming.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll come to what it actually means. The Mind Unleashed claimed that the conclusion of this paper is that chemotherapy may shrink a cancerous tumour, but it simply sends the cancer cells off into other parts of the body to rebuild into yet additional destructive tumours, which actually disagrees with what they'd said earlier, where they said that these cancer cells can now replicate themselves. So they're saying they can replicate themselves, but they shrink cancerous tumours.
Right.
Well, they can, they just choose not to.
I think they've just kind of... They don't understand the science, so they've just conflated different things. They then make the leap that this therefore makes a massive move in exposing the perpetual fraud of the chemotherapy/cancer industry.
The cancer industry.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
I'm sick of hearing about the cancer industry. Nobody will define what the cancer industry is, but they'll use it to refer to lots of things, including Cancer Research UK, medical research councils, charities, industry, pharmaceutical companies. They won't define what it is, so they'll apply it to everything.
1/12 of those companies that make Zodiac key rings.
Yes. But they must assume that the people working for places like Cancer Research UK and people like yourself, they must assume that you're just psychotic.
Yeah.
That, your friends and relatives are dying of cancer as well, but you're like, but I'm making a few quid for the board. So
but worse than that,
so
there'll
fine.
be people who've worked at Cancer Research who've had cancer.
With cancer.
So they're psychotic enough to say, well, I'm so committed to suppressing the cure that I'm going to carry on working in Cancer Research, and then, there will be cancer researchers who've died of cancer.
Yeah. But they did that obviously to make a few quid for the shareholders of
but this is the other thing. The cancer researchers are paid peanuts, nothing. They're not getting any benefit from it. In fact, they're sacrificed to work in cancer research. Often, depending on what your job is, but for most people, you're sacrificing everything. You have to make huge, massive sacrifices on your time, your social life, your family life, where you live.
How much time you spend with your dickhead dog.
Yeah.
I said this is starting to get very personal, Alice.
You don't get paid very well at all. Why would you do it? There's no benefit to you. Maybe for the top dogs in the big pharma companies, they're going to make money. But
the biggest pharma.
They don't spend a lot of time in the lab doing that, though, do they? No. They spend a lot of time in the boardroom.
Yes, exactly. Often not even PhDs necessarily in the thing that they're working on, because that's not the point in their particular job.
I genuinely wonder, and I have no data on this, but I wonder whether how the salaries of the people in marketing compare to the people in the labs.
Depending on the company, they are probably paid an awful... But sales reps, I don't know. Marketing probably paid a lot more.
I guess sales reps would make a lot of money on commission somewhere down the line. I wonder what the take-home pay at the end of the year for someone in the marketing and someone in the labs in one of those companies is. I have absolutely no idea. But,
my experience would say probably people in marketing are paid a lot more than people in labs, because people in labs are paid very poorly. It does depend on the company. So in industry, you will get paid better than in academia.
Yes, yeah.
But even then, I don't think they're paid hugely well. It depends on your job, but if you're just working in a lab, then you're
so
usually not.
What you're saying is it's not so much a lab as a workhouse. So it's the 21st century workhouse.
For saying to work in any kind of laboratory research, you have to have the highest level of education that you can possibly get. Anything above PhD is honorary. To be a professor is honorary. To anything above that is honorary. You've got the highest level of education. You've spent up to and above, depending on where you qualified, 8, 9, 10 years in education to get to that stage, and then you paid
a degree level and above. I mean, obviously, it's going to be more than 8 years education cumulatively.
Well, from my undergrad, I've been in 8 years, and that's relatively short. Like in other countries, PhDs are much longer than in the UK. People can be trapped in PhDs for 8, 9, 10 years just on its own in places like America. And yet you paid very poorly. Like if I'd have gone into academic research, or if I do go into academic research in any university, other than places like Liverpool, I will take a pay cut because I'll suddenly start paying tax. I'll take a pay cut from my PhD funding, from my educational funding, because postdocs are paid so poorly. There's no incentive for anybody to keep this secret.
So what you're saying is you want to get into marketing?
Yeah. I need to work for Big Pharma, that's the problem. They go on to say, in America alone, it's a $200 billion industry. It's part of the reason why our insurance premiums are ridiculously high and unassuming cancer sufferers keep suffering. They even go on to say, with this research, prescribing chemotherapy to any cancer patient should be considered criminal, especially when we know of dozens of natural treatments that are much more effective and don't cause tumours to spread.
Jesus Christ.
Of course, they end the piece with a list of some of these natural treatments that they offer up as alternatives. Their words, not mine, including Max Gerson therapy, the Budwig protocol, which they say involves loading the body with healthy omega-3s and removing toxic buildup with turmeric and black pepper.
That's omega-3s that have just been blacklisted by NHS England
for having no
as part of the step one of this same consultation process.
Vitamin C chelation and medical marijuana. But what about the study itself? The study was looking into the effect of a chemotherapeutic agent called paclitaxel, brand name Taxol, which, according to Wikipedia, is recommended by NICE in the UK for non-small cell lung cancer in patients who are unsuitable for curative treatments, as a first or second-line therapy in ovarian cancer, and for advanced breast cancer after failure to respond to another specific family of chemotherapy drugs.
Okay, so there's only one type of cancer where they are not curative, where it's kind of... The first it's kind of like
last resort sort of thing.
Okay, but the others are potentially curative.
It's a good therapy. I'll come on to why it's generally not recommended, but it is, as far as we know from many years of studies, it is a very good. It's very efficacious. It's very good at reducing tumour size.
Yeah.
There are reasons that we don't typically prescribe it as often as we would do, but I'll come back to that. In 2006, NICE recommended that paclitaxel should not be used in adjuvant treatment of early node-positive breast cancer. So that means adjuvant means pre-primary treatment. So if you're undergoing surgery, you might take paclitaxel first. To shrink the tumour and then have the surgery. NICE recommends that you don't do this in the case of patients with early lymph node positive breast cancer, so where it is already in your lymph nodes. Paclitaxel works by binding with a protein called tubulin, which is a structural protein involved in cell division, and cells treated with this drug have defects in mitotic spindle assembly, chromosome segregation, and cell division. Basically, the mitosis of cells is blocked, which subsequently triggers cell death. So the cells stop dividing, stop growing, and die. So the drug both prevents tumour growth and reduces tumour size. I actually went off to look a bit more into the history of paclitaxel. It's really interesting, particularly when proponents of pseudoscience think we should use natural options that are not funded by Big Pharma. Paclitaxel was first identified in the early 1960s. It was identified by a screen which was driven by the National Cancer Institute in America, a government-funded body. not a pharmaceutical company. They performed a screen looking for compounds that might be useful in treating cancer. Their screen was looking at plant derivatives. Paclitaxel is derived from the bark of the Pacific yew tree.
Okay.
Can also be found in Japanese and European yew trees, although research has shown that the Pacific yew tree is a better source of as the compound is less variable. We've studied paclitaxel for a long time before it was approved by the FDA for use in cancer in 1992. We've known its chemical structure since 1971 and its mechanism of action since 1979.
But it was still 30 years from discovery to approval.
Exactly, yeah. And that's how long these things take in medicine. Pharmaceutical companies have to charge so much for their drugs because it's fucking expensive and takes a fucking long time to get drugs through to use.
Well, if you want to do 5 and 10 year survival studies, it's going to take 5 and 10 years. You know, you can't shortcut things like that.
Yeah, and then you've got to do all the safety checks, and you've got to argue. You know, you've got to prove that it is actually going to work to treat cancer. It's not just working in the lab; it's going to work in patients as well.
That's true. Although the flip side to the devil's advocate is they still make really healthy profits.
They do.
So they could,
of course they
could charge less and still be profitable.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily pro pharmaceutical companies. Yeah. Pharmaceutical companies certainly do a lot wrong, but it also does take an awful long time for us to get drugs through to clinic. Of course, since the drug is derived from a plant, there have been many efforts to produce it synthetically because, you know, we don't want to rip out all our Pacific yew trees to treat cancer. These have only been partially successful. We still use a precursor derived from the needles of the tree in order to produce paclitaxel. It is still derived from plants.
Okay.
Deriving it from the bark means each complete treatment of 2 grams costs approximately 4 trees.
Jesus.
But we can improve the numbers of this by using this precursor derived from the needles of the tree instead.
Sure.
And paclitaxel isn't an ideal treatment. So 25 to 30% of patients suffer quite substantial side effects, and all patients require pre-treatment with corticoids, steroids and antihistamines to prevent hypersensitivity, which is believed to actually derive from the solvent that paclitaxel has to be solubilized in. It's not soluble in water, so it has to be solubilized in chemicals in order to get it into the system. And those are the things that are quite dangerous. And this is why we often don't use it, because it's not very well tolerated by patients. It's a very good anti-cancer drug, but it's not very well tolerated by patients. And it's always weighing up those two
sort of quality of life.
Exactly, yeah. And of course, very extreme hypersensitivity cases can cause death anyway. So, you know, you've got to be very careful to give it to the right patients at the right time with the right additional drugs just to make sure that everything's okay. This means that there are lots of efforts trying to find safer ways to deliver the drug, but in the meantime, despite its clear efficacy, it is often not a first choice treatment. So back to the study. The study we're talking about here was looking at metastasis of breast cancer. The efficacy of paclitaxel is not under fire here. We know it works well. The purpose of the study was to look at a particular quirk of paclitaxel treatment. Clinical studies have shown that when paclitaxel is used as a neoadjuvant, the tumour size shrinks, but overall survival does not improve.
Okay.
That's not to say that survival rates worsen. There's just no difference despite the tumour size reducing. So you would expect if the tumour size reduces that patients would survive longer. That's not necessarily the case.
And so that's unusual though, isn't it? That you would expect if the tumour was shrinking, that would improve survival, but it's not doing that. So there's obviously something else going on.
Yes. Yeah. So the quirk we notice is that you don't get an additive survival rate when combining paclitaxel with another treatment, despite there being an effect on the tumour size, basically. So the authors wanted to investigate this further, and that was the purpose of their study. And they'd previously shown some potential link to a particular marker of metastasis. The authors noted that cells of the immune system called macrophages are involved in the assembly of structures called tumour microenvironment of metastasis, or TMEM sites, and that paclitaxel has been linked to an influx of macrophages into tumours. So the link between macrophages and TMEM sites is established. They've established a link between paclitaxel and macrophages, and what they're trying to establish is whether paclitaxel increases these sites that are indicative of an increased chance of metastasis.
Okay.
So they want to see if there's a correlation between paclitaxel treatment and the number of TMEM sites in tumours. And if there was an increase in TMEM sites, a structure known to play a role in metastasis, then it might explain why paclitaxel treatment doesn't improve survival in this specific context.
Yeah, because although it shrinks the tumour, it increases the risk of metastasis, and overall you end up with about the same survival rate.
Exactly.
Okay.
The study itself involved 4 different breast cancer mouse models: a transgenic mouse which spontaneously grows tumours, which they had 21 of, a mouse model which is injected with tumour cells in order to form tumours, which they had 36 of, and 2 xenograft models in which tumours are grafted under the skin, so they had 29 and 26 of those 2 different types.
Mm-hmm. Does it make a difference which type of one you're using? Because the way you were describing it there, they had the ones that grow tumours by themselves, which they had 21 of, and then 36 of this other one, that they had 36 of them. It made it sound like, well, you need a couple of hundred mice. What have you got? Well, I've got like 21 of these. All right, I'll take 21 of them, 36 of them. What else have you got? Well, there's one running around the back of the bins. I can grab that if you like.
It's the lab mouse pick and mix. They do it by weight.
They do. It's classically do it by weight. You get like a big sort of see-through plastic container, and then you get a little scoop, and you scoop mice in and put the lid on them, weigh them. Yeah.
The answer to the question is I'm not entirely sure, but I don't think you were actually asking that. You just wanted to make a joke.
Largely so, yes.
They compared vehicle-treated to paclitaxel-treated mice and looked at their tumour size, TMEM density, and circulating tumour cells. And they did find that paclitaxel appears to increase the TMEM density and the circulating tumour cells while decreasing tumour size, hinting that perhaps mice treated with paclitaxel are more prone to metastasis, but the tumour size is reducing. Far from this exposing any kind of perpetual fraud of the chemotherapy/cancer industry or indicating that prescribing chemotherapy to any cancer patient should be considered criminal. This should be seen as a positive step in medical research. We have a treatment that is already in use and making money for the manufacturers. We have medical researchers who have identified a problem with this therapy and researched what that might mean. And we've identified a problem. Not only that, this study went on to try and solve the problem. They realised that there was a key protein involved in the formation of TMEM sites in mice, so they combined paclitaxel with an inhibitor to that protein, and lo and behold, the markers of metastasis reduced.
Okay.
Did the survival increase in line with that, or did they not measure that?
They weren't looking at survival in the mice because they called the mice.
Okay, so they didn't measure survival in the mice. They were just looking at
markers of
the chemical markers.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
The authors themselves do not conclude that we should stop using chemotherapy. They say, because metastatic disease is the major cause of cancer-related mortality and is currently incurable, it is critical that we develop strategies to prevent progression of cancer to the metastatic stage and to prevent further spread from already existing metastatic foci. Therefore, our finding that chemotherapy, when given in the setting of clinically active disease, may promote cancer cell dissemination is of major concern. However, our data indicate that strategies can be developed to prevent chemotherapy-induced cell dissemination and subsequent metastasis. This can be done either by discontinuing neoadjuvant chemotherapy in patients whose tumours show neoadjuvant chemotherapy-induced pro-metastatic changes, or by combining neoadjuvant chemotherapy with agents that block this cancer cell dissemination, such as selective TIE2 inhibitors, which would be useful not only in neoadjuvant chemotherapy treatment of localized breast cancer, but also in treatment of metastatic breast cancer.
So they're saying they can stop giving it if it looks like
if your markers
your markers indicate that your tumour is likely to start to metastasize as a result of your chemotherapy.
Yeah.
Or they can give you this top-up drug that they've figured out that will help block that happening once we've gone through the human trials, etc., etc., etc.
Exactly. Yeah. So basically, they conclude that we can use this additional information to look for markers of increased risk of metastasis, discontinue the treatment in susceptible patients, or use combinatorial therapies in order to prevent the metastasis, which might be influenced by the chemotherapeutic agent. It's an interesting study, but it is only one study which has yet to be reported. It's in mouse models. It requires further research in humans. It is by no means a sign that we should distrust cancer research. In fact, it's a sign of cancer research working well. It certainly doesn't mean we should discontinue chemotherapy in patients, nor should we offer any kind of alternative therapy that hasn't been subject to rigorous testing with evidence of efficacy.
So the time has finally come where something has happened of sufficient import that I get to talk about Doctor Who legitimately on the show. It's only taken 8 years.
You've definitely
You've talked about it
legitimately.
Non-legitimately.
You've had stories about
You have
Doctor
had
Who in the
entire
past.
stories about it.
Legitimately. It's only taken 8 years, and it's still a bit of a stretch, but it has finally happened. So, the BBC have announced that when Peter Capaldi leaves the show this Christmas, he will be replaced in the part by Jodie Whittaker.
Yes.
Listeners may know Jodie Whittaker from her role in Broadchurch, where she stars alongside David Tennant.
Never seen it before in my life.
I've not seen Broadchurch either.
It's supposed to be really good, though. Like, everybody says
series,
it's
apparently.
really good. I haven't seen it either.
There was an amazing thing, Philomena Kunk of the Charlie Brooker's review of the year described it best. Well, Diane Morgan playing the character, where she said the first series, there was like a whodunit. That was the mystery. It's like, we got to find out who the killer is. And then the second series, the mystery is why they made a second series.
You might be more familiar with Jodie Whittaker from Black Mirror. Where she was in the episode The Entire History of You, which is the one where you've got this kind of grain that lives behind your ear that records everything you do, and this guy has a big breakdown because his girlfriend has had an affair with his best friend. And
I think I've not seen that one.
He makes them play it back, etc.
I think that's the only one I've not seen.
But she played a character called Fionn in that.
Oh, hang on. Yes, yes.
You don't remember it from any of the description, but mention a name.
Or mention the character
name that did it. I was putting it together.
The entire history was actually optioned by Robert Downey Jr. to make a Hollywood movie version of that same plot because he thought it was so good.
Nice.
Bonus trivia there. What is notable about Jodie Whittaker's casting, however, is that unlike almost every previous version of the Doctor, and I'll come to what I mean by almost in a minute, unlike almost every other previous version of the Doctor, Jodie Whittaker is a woman, and thus the internet collectively lost its shit. Although, to be honest, that's unfair. The vast majority of fans and viewers, I think, welcomed the news, and outgoing producer Stephen Moffat has quoted BBC figures that show about 80% of messages on social media mentioning Whittaker's casting were positive. However, that hasn't stopped all sorts of spurious arguments being bandied about and stoked naturally by the more embarrassing corners of the British press. And being someone who is known to have something of a Doctor Who fan persuasion, I've been fielding questions left and right from people who are asking me how the casting of a woman in the part fits into existing Doctor Who lore.
Right.
Now, in the past, I have characterised a key feature of skepticism as being a high regard for the truth, whatever that might be, putting what is actually the case ahead of what you might want to be the case, and clearly within the context of a fictional television programme, there is a limit to how far you can push the idea of any kind of objective truth. But let's give it a bash anyway, with the acknowledged proviso that this is a work of fiction, and the rules are therefore a little more flexible than if we were dealing with reality. So this is my quick rundown of Doctor Who-related myths as pertaining to the casting of Jodie Whittaker.
You've done like a BuzzFeed style.
Little BuzzFeed style. I've only got 4 of them, but there we go. So number 1.
Will number 3 really amaze us?
Let's have a look. Yes, it will. Yes, it will. Number 1, this is a box-ticking exercise. Depending on how you want to define box-ticking exercise, I'd say this one's... You could describe this as true. The head writer for the series, Chris Chibnall, has stated that he explicitly sought to cast a woman as the 13th Doctor, and it is not known if any men were even considered, much less shortlisted or auditioned. However, that does not mean that the production team has necessarily compromised on quality simply because they went into the casting room specifically looking for a woman for the part. It doesn't mean that any more than it did when, for the last 13 Doctors, they went into the casting room specifically looking for a man.
Yeah.
Some people might argue that the production team should be looking to cast the best actor for the part, regardless of gender, and that by only auditioning women, they have not cast the best actor for the part, but only the best female actor for the part. Now, leaving aside the implicit sexist assumption in that statement, this is also a false dichotomy. I've no doubt that there are many dozens of actors from all genders currently working who would make a spectacular Doctor. The idea that there is one single best actor for the part is simplistic, and in truth there will be a collection of actors who are well suited to the role, and the production team clearly believe that one of those is Jodie Whittaker.
I mean, if that was true, that they have to have the best actor for the part...
One objective actor.
That's saying that Peter Capaldi is the 6th best Doctor, the 6th best actor to play the Doctor. Like in terms of that, who could do that role? Because David Tennant's still alive, Matt Smith's still alive, and the McGann guy's still alive,
and so on and so on.
All the things. So like John Hurt recently went, otherwise he would have been above him. Maybe he wouldn't have been above him, but because you're saying then that if number 1 isn't available, so we're on our second best choice, and Peter Capaldi at that point has to be 6th best because the other 5 won't do it anymore.
Myth number 2: Jodie Whittaker is the first woman to play the Doctor. Not technically true, although she is.
It was Bob Holness in a South African radio play.
It was. She is the first woman to play the Doctor within the mainstream continuity of the show. The first woman to play the Doctor was actually Joanna Lumley in a sketch for Comic Relief in 1999. The second woman to play the Doctor was Arabella Weir from The Fast Show, who played the part in an audio series called Doctor Who Unbound, which was a series of what-if stories. What if the Doctor had never left Gallifrey? What if the Doctor believed the ends justified the means? And so on. Arabella Weir played an alternative version of the Doctor who had escaped the Time Lords at the end of the 6th season, whereas in the TV show continuity, the Doctor doesn't escape and he is tried for the crime of interfering with the affairs of other peoples and planets. So although Jodie Whittaker is the first woman to play the part within the mainstream TV continuity, she isn't the first woman to play the part by any means, and oddly enough, nobody gave a shit about the last 2. 3. The original series establishes that Time Lords can only regenerate within their gender.
Right, okay.
Short version, no. Longer version, during the original run of the show, we only saw multiple regenerations of 4, possibly 5 different Time Lords. And in each case, the regeneration was within the same gender. So throughout the original run of the show, we saw the Doctor regenerate 6 times, each time into a man. But beyond the Doctor, we also have Romana, who was a travelling companion of the Doctor, who was also a Time Lord, played by Mary Tam. When Tam decided not to continue in the part after just 1 season, the character was shown to regenerate, and for the next season and a half, Romana was played by Lalla Ward, latterly married to Richard Dawkins, although I gather they've recently split up.
Why would you bring that up now?
Trivia, bonus trivia. And of course, both Romanas were played by women. There was also a Time Lord called Campo who appeared in one story in the mid-70s, who we see regenerate on screen. Again, both the incarnations of Campo we see are men. And there was a character called Barusa who appeared several times in the late 70s and early 80s. We never see Barusa regenerate on screen, but every time he appears, he's played by a different actor, and each time that actor is a man.
Is it bad that when you said the Romanas, I wanted to say to them, could you just tell the Romanas to get over it? You lost. Sorry, I can't help. Get over it, Romanas.
There's also a character called the Castellan who was played by several different actors, but it isn't made explicit whether this is the same character or not, so he doesn't really count. The Master, incidentally, also doesn't count because we never actually see the Master regenerate in the original series. So in each case, we have only seen Time Lords regenerating within their gender, the Doctor, Romana, Campo, and Barusa. This is, at best, circumstantial evidence, though. There is no line of dialogue, no scene, no script which ever explicitly says that you cannot regenerate from a man into a woman or vice versa. That is never stated on screen at any point. And then once you incorporate the continuity of the new series, that explicitly makes it clear that Time Lords can change gender during their regenerations. The Corsair is a Time Lord who is mentioned, never seen on screen, but is mentioned, and references are made to different genders. The Master is obviously portrayed by Derek Jacobi, John Sim, and Michelle Gomez. And there is a character called the General who is seen on screen regenerating from a bald white man into a bald black woman. When that happens, there is a nod to the fact that we haven't seen this happen on screen before, when the General comments that she'd only ever been a man once and she didn't enjoy it very much. A hint that perhaps Time Lords maybe mostly stay within their same gender, and switching happens but is perhaps rare. Not only that, but the show has gone so far as to suggest in the past that the Doctor doesn't even need to be humanoid after a regeneration, much less that he has to be a man. In the 1996 movie, the 8th Doctor says that he can become a different species when he regenerates. In The Parting of the Ways, the 9th Doctor says that he might end up with 2 heads or no head. And in The End of Time, the 11th Doctor seems overjoyed by the fact that he still has legs.
So when the arseholes writing for, I don't know, like the Telegraph or the Spiked Online, or one of those type of arseholes said, what next? A dog playing the Doctor?
Could happen.
Perfectly within
that is established in continuity that the Doctor can transform into another species in principle.
I want to see that series. Like they've cast a dog, they've stunt cast a dog, and now they have to live with that decision for an entire series. Oh, it'd be amazing.
What's that, Doctor? Timmy's fallen down the time well.
The Daleks fell down the well. Yeah. Can't get back out, that's the problem.
Oddly enough, no one seemed to care about the Doctor not being humanoid, but being a woman is apparently beyond the pale.
I like all the people who are like, no, it goes against the law. It goes against the whole backstory that the Doctor can be a woman. It goes against that. I'm a purist. I believe in the original style of Doctor Who, which is why the series ends when Capaldi dies, because he's got no more regenerations left. So I think we should stick to the original purism. None of the reworked stuff afterwards, because wasn't there a bit where they said 13 or something?
Yes, there was, yeah.
Well, I've never seen it, but I know these things. So, yeah.
My friend James mentioned on Twitter where he said, people keep saying that the casting of Jodie Whittaker is PC gone mad, but I think that's quite harsh on Peter Capaldi.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, good.
Finally, my last Doctor Who myth. Fifth Doctor actor Peter Davison is against the casting of Jodie Whittaker. This came from an article in The Telegraph reporting on comments that Davison had made at San Diego Comic-Con. They quote Davison as saying, "If I feel any doubts, it's about the loss of a role model for boys who I think Doctor Who is vitally important for."
He is not important for me. Doctor Who, he, she, they... None of them are important to me in the slightest.
Vitally important. This has resulted in Davison taking abuse on social media with accusations that he is a sexist, that he is stupid, that he was crap in the part anyway, and other comments that have all but handed him off Twitter. Today, he's very heavily implied on Twitter today that he's done, he's leaving because of the abuse that he's taken. He said, "It's just a silly sci-fi show. I'm done." In fact, Davison's full quote is far more nuanced and balanced than you get from just reading the headline in The Telegraph. What he actually said was, "It's a fantastic opportunity for her, and I think it will be hard for some fans to adjust to it. As I've said before, I think it's difficult to adjust to any new Doctor, but I think the important thing is that those who are uncertain should be encouraged to watch it with an open mind. The time for discussion is past. They've made the announcement. Jodie Whittaker is the Doctor, and that's great."
Get over it, Ramonas. Get over it.
If I feel any doubt about it, it's the loss of a role model for boys who I think Doctor Who is vitally important for. So I'm a bit sad about that. But I understand the argument that you've got to open it up, and that's absolutely fair enough. She has my best wishes and full confidence. I'm sure she will do a wonderful job. As a viewer, I kind of like the idea of Doctor Who as a boy, but then maybe I'm an old-fashioned dinosaur. Who knows? That's irrelevant now. The time for discussion is over. We have a new Doctor. Let's give her our full support. Which is far more positive a statement than is currently being attributed to him. And I can understand Peter's fears about the loss of a role model for boys, speaking as someone who grew up with the Doctor as my role model, and Peter's Doctor quite specifically. It's nice to have a hero who solves problems with brains and not fists. Compare that to other hero characters like Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, Iron Man, Wonder Woman, Captain America, James Bond. Yes, they use their brains at times, but they do still get their fists out when it comes down to it. How many superhero movies finish with a big fist fight, you know?
Yeah, they tend to.
Like more or less all of them. I think Doctor Strange is the only one I can think of that isn't a big fist fight at the end. That doesn't say that there aren't big fist fights throughout the film anyway. It rarely happens in Doctor Who. Sometimes, you know, the Doctor will thump somebody, but it's rare. And I think showing children that kind of character is a good thing. Where I think Peter is wrong, or where I hope Peter is wrong, is that I don't think a woman playing the Doctor means that she can't be a role model for boys. The last 12 Doctors managed to inspire plenty of young girls. I don't see why a woman Doctor can't inspire young boys. Perhaps that's naive of me, and I know there's pushes about like all the arguments for Wonder Woman, and why it was a great thing was as a superhero role model for little girls. And after Wonder Woman came out, the number of little girls I saw in the street in a little Wonder Woman outfit.
And the same with the female remake of Ghostbusters.
Providing those kind of female role models.
That can be a different thing. You can have somebody of the opposite gender as a role model to you, but if you're not represented at all...
Indeed, yes.
That's
absolutely.
a very negative thing.
There's plenty of boys
It's a different thing.
One of my favourite kind of hot takes on this was someone who was saying, oh yeah, the Doctor can be female, but unlike all the men, she has to be attractive. I was like, I don't think you've been watching a lot of responses to male doctors in the past. You haven't scrolled through any Tumblrs about David Tennant recently at all.
But if I disagree with anything Peter Davison said, it's that part of it, that the Doctor can't be a role model for young boys anymore, because I think she can. Regardless, his comments on Whittaker's casting were mostly positive, albeit with one perhaps legitimate reservation. Following on from that, The Express is now reporting that Colin Baker, who played the Sixth Doctor, has slammed Peter Davison for his comments. From The Express, Colin Baker slams Peter Davison's comments about female Doctor as absolute rubbish. A rift, in caps, has formed between the Doctors, with Colin Baker accusing Peter Davison of talking absolute rubbish after he claimed boys would lose a role model with a female Time Lord. Again, this is a misrepresentation of what had happened and what was said. Colin Baker was also talking at San Diego Comic-Con about this, appearing on stage with Peter. He made his comments only moments after Peter Davison, and it's very likely that Peter was standing there within earshot when Colin said it. What Colin actually says was, they've had 50 years of having a role model, so sorry, Peter, I think you're talking rubbish. Absolute rubbish. You don't have to be the gender of somebody to be their role model. Can't you just be a role model as people?
They said that a rift has emerged between them as a result of that. Is it just because they were at San Diego Comic-Con and it was a San Antonio fault line? There was a minor earthquake, a literal rift opened between them.
But nevertheless, Colin Baker is now taking flack from people who support Peter Davison's position and think that Colin is having a go at Peter Davison. But that's not the case either. It's very unlikely that there is any bad blood between these people.
You're allowed to disagree with people you're mates with.
Yeah, they've known each other for 30 years.
No, you're not.
Following these interviews, they appeared on stage together at Comic-Con and everything was fine. Talk of a rift between them is sensationalist tabloid gossip. As for what I think about Jodie Whittaker, I think she's going to be fucking awesome. Okay, so Liverpool Pride takes place each year, Liverpool Gay Pride, and it's something that for the last few years Merseyside Skeptics has taken part in. We're going to be doing so again this year, so that's taking place this Saturday, which is the 29th of July. I gather we're going to be mustering outside St George's Hall again, which is the regular place that we gather.
I hear that's what's happening.
Yeah, unfortunately, none of the three of us, I think, can actually make it this year for various reasons.
None of the board of directors at all.
Actually, none of the directors of Merseyside Skeptics can make it. But there will be representatives from Merseyside Skeptics there.
Yes, there will be plenty of our fellow people.
With our rainbow banner will be there.
Our enormous rainbow banner with Merseyside Skeptics Society written on it. So if you're in the Liverpool area and want to take part in that, you can come along to that. Details of that are available on our Facebook. Look out for the big scary rainbow banner, and we will march in support of Gay Pride because there is no rational reason for homophobia. We also have our social event, the Liverpool Skeptics in the Pub social event, which is next Thursday, so a week today.
Yep.
That's in Dr. Duncan's on St John's Lane from 8 o'clock. So if you're in the Liverpool area, you can come along to that. Again, that one is up on our Facebook.
Yeah.
And Edinburgh, we're going to plug you guys being up in Edinburgh again, doing your bit. I've seen your talk shared around quite a bit, Alice's. I've seen no one talking about marshes.
No one said a word about mine.
Not a thing.
No
Not
one
a damn
said a
thing.
word. No, not at all.
So what are you guys doing and when?
I'm on Wednesday the 16th in the evening. Talking about cancer, OVS.
Yes.
But I think it'd be fun.
It does. Sounds exciting.
I'll make it like not too cancery, not too like horrible cancery.
Yeah.
We'll talk about interesting things about cancer.
Fluffy cancer.
Will parts of your talk start happening in other parts of the same venue as well?
Some metastatic talks.
That'd be good. Just like other people start talking about cancer randomly during some of their other stand-ups in the same venues. I don't know what happened here, actually. Yeah. I'm going to be talking about the whole idea of the talk is bad PR and what's happened to the news. How I'll probably throw in some stuff as well about how the stuff that I've been talking about for years under the bad PR sort of banner has shown the kind of framework that has later been exploited by the fake news propaganda stuff that we've seen more recently. So I'll be doing that on the Thursday the 17th. At 10 to 8, I think it is, at Banshees Labyrinth.
Yeah.
So if you're up in Edinburgh on either of those 2 days, pop in. If you're up on Edinburgh on any other day, pop into Banshees Labyrinth at 10 to 8 and see one of the other great talks that they've got on as well. So yeah, you've got an entire month's worth of stuff there.
I'd point out they didn't even ask me.
No.
Did not even... I mean, I'd have said no anyway.
Yeah,
really
no
busy.
one asked you to go places anymore.
But no, didn't even ask me.
Yeah.
Didn't even ask me.
No one invites you to do talks. No one invites you on podcasts. The world has turned you into a skeptical recluse.
Yeah, I'm a little. I quite like to think that I'm like a little brown recluse spider. Like I just live in your shoe.
Yeah,
and throw out comments about the placebos.
Basically, you can be added to the Wikipedia page for known recluses.
You should write a placebo talk.
You should write a placebo talk.
I mean, I might write a placebo talk. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes.
So that's all the events we've got.
The only other thing that that I wanted to talk about was Emma. So we had Emma on the show.
We did.
Last episode.
We've had some good feedback.
We have had some good feedback, and it's always nice to have Emma on the show and bringing in a different level of expertise to what a lot of skeptical podcasts and skeptical blogs talk about. A lot of stuff that we talk about is kind of par for the course, standard skeptical fare, and to have someone coming in on with that slightly different subject matter, I think, is a healthy thing for skepticism, and it's great that we're able to do that on the show.
Yeah, I think so. I think Emma, it's another of those cases where you show the skeptical tools and skeptical mindset can be applied to other areas and in other ways. And I think Emma's got some interesting stories. I'm sure she'll be back on the show again in the future. So if you do have any questions about the state of prisons in the UK, or anything around that kind of area, if you do send them in, I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to put them to Emma at some point on a future appearance. So when we ask for questions to podcast@merseyside-skeptics.org.uk, they can be questions to us about stuff, they can be questions to us about stuff we haven't talked about before, or they could be questions to Emma either.
Aside from that, then, I think that is all we have time for.
I think so.
All that remains then is for me to thank Marsh for coming along today.
Cheers.
And thank you to Alice.
Thank you.
We have been Skeptics with a K, and we will see you next time.
Bye now.
Bye.
Skeptics with a K is a production of the Merseyside Skeptics Society. For more information, visit our website www.merseysideskeptics.org.uk or email podcast@merseysideskeptics.org.uk.
Two people in the ceremony stopped mid-stage with the Chancellor to take a selfie of themselves and the Chancellor in front of the audience.
No.
2 people.
Oh, bell ends.
That's a disgrace.
That is awful.
Really bad.
Did they whip out a selfie stick?
Oh,
No,
God.
they didn't.
From under their robes. Did they spend too long trying to sort of put a Snapchat filter on it? It's like, here's me and the Vice Chancellor as puppies.